You might have gone directly.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm just going, we're not quite there, just going through my checklist here. We're ready to begin.
It is 6:03 PM. This is Mike Romer, the president of the Moraga-Orinda Fire Protection District Board of Directors. It's April 17th, 2024, and I will call the meeting to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Danziger,
Here.
Director Hassler. Director Jex is absent. He will be coming. He is late. Director Jorgens. Director Romer.
Here. So let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Flags to our left here.
Over here.
Oh, it's to our right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, under God, one God, in liberty and justice. So agenda item 2 would be public comment on closed session items. Do we have anything?
We do not have any public comment. I'm just checking to see when we do not have any attendees.
So we will close the public session and proceed to enter the closed session. Agenda item 3.
Time is 6:04.
Okay. It's 7 o'clock. Mike Romer, President of the Board of Directors. I'd like to reconvene the open meeting by calling the open meeting to order.
Director Danziger,
Here.
Director Hassler,
Here. Here.
Director Jorgens, President Romer.
Here. Item 5, report of closed session action. There's nothing to report. So we'll move on to item 6, public comment items not on the agenda. Do we have any comment?
We have one hand raised.
Go ahead.
There we are. This is Jonathan Goodwin from Canyon. The decision about the standards of coverage document it was the board, as far as I know, this is true. The board was told it would be a board decision, and then it turned into be not a board decision. The public was kind of cut out of the process of this. I asked Mr. Holtzman if this was in line or out of line with the Brown Act. He chose not to respond. If this thing is shady, I hope you would do it. Because if there is, and I'm not saying there is, but if there is some sort of ethical situation. The second thing is I want you to know that I've made peace. I want you to know that I've made. There's an awful lot of noise coming back on me. Yeah, okay. I've made peace with the fact you guys don't want to have independent view on the district that you would get from a standard coverage document, because actually, I finally realized you never want an independent view of anything. You just get what you get on the agenda. You ask a few questions around the edges, and then you eat what is up to you. This happens again and again. And in fact, the meeting tonight, there's no substance at all in terms of description of what these $100,000 projects of one sort or another are about. There's no analysis. There's no analysis of what alternatives are. There's absolutely nothing. You guys are just expected to, to be okay. Last thing I want to say is dailydispatch.com article August 7th, 2023 by David Winokur. It says, I just lost it. Critically, not appear to be a body of evidence supporting the efficacy of fuel break, stated or otherwise. This is in italics, one line. This was at the same time that he was pushing you guys to pass that ordinance, demanding arbitrarily located, where you can't get a vehicle to them so the firefighters can use them. He says those are not helpful. And yet, so my bet is that you need, how can you this and say you don't have a second opinion on that? That just makes no sense. And I'm just going to stop there and let you ponder whether or not you're really doing your job or pretending to.
Thank you. I don't know whether council wants to briefly respond to the issue of whether the board has the discretion to handle the standards of coverage issue in-house or.
Sure, Jonathan, I'll respond very, very briefly. The Brown Act addresses the question of communications by board members, both with each other and the public. And so this issue of how the standards of coverage is being handled is not a Brown Act issue unless for some reason you're asserting that more than 2 members of the board, in other words, a quorum of the board, got together impermissibly, which I have no information that would support that.
Are you? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that. I have a layman's familiarity. I know there was a the point of it, the spirit of it was to prevent things from going on in the background.
Hold on, Jonathan. We appreciate the 3 minutes that you've already taken up. We did furnish an answer, and I think we need to move on to other public comment. So
That's fine. There's a lot of feedback coming through on my end. It's very hard for me to hear myself speak. If that could be addressed, it'd be helpful.
Thank you. We're addressing it, and I received a text message from Director Hasler saying that he was having some difficulty with the audio. So if we can pause for a moment, I can check with our.
Maybe we can have them turn down the speakers in here. That just.
all right, let's take a moment to make sure that our whether we can improve the technical capability for both Director Hassler and for our public.
Director Hasler, can you say something for us and so we can check the audio with you?
Yeah, I'm just testing the audio. I can hear okay now. There's no feedback, so
Okay, so it's better.
it sounds much better now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Hassler's comments were loud and clear from my standpoint too, so that appears to be working. And I'll just note for the record, there was a little bit of feedback in Jonathan Goodwin's public comments, but I understood everything that he said.
Great.
So, okay, we'll appreciate the feedback and we'll try to keep improving our technical ability as best we can. Are there any other public comments?
We do not have any more hands raised or any public comment.
Let's move on to agenda item number 7, announcements. 7.1, brief information only reports related to meetings attended by a director at District of Snooks. Are there any? Hearing none. What?
This is not the outdated.
This is not the most.
Yeah, we did. There was one meeting that the chief and I went to with the Orinda School District, which is not part of my committee or anything. It just happened to be within my district, so I did go. So I guess that would be wasn't a district expense, but I'm not sure that's critical. It had to do with mostly with the Sleepy Hollow School evacuation plans, and I think there was a fair amount of increase in understanding of what the situation was and who was responsible for what, and I think some good ideas that people are following up on came out of it, which I don't think it's appropriate to point out till we figure out what the real answers are. There's going to be more community involvement and community education, and so I think that it was a good meeting.
Great. Well, I appreciate both you and the chief taking the time to do that. That's important. 7.2, questions and informational comments from board members and staff.
I have a question. I have a question. Marcia?
Yeah.
When a director speaks, I couldn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I had mine on mute. I'm sorry.
Got it.
Thank
Okay.
you. It's supposed to light up. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Yes, the microphone should turn red when we're talking.
Any others? Should we move on to 7.3, communications received? We received 2 communications. I've read both of them. Appreciate the input as always. Move on to 7.4, fire chief updates, finance report.
Good evening, directors. We'll begin the fire chief update with the finance report. Mary Smith.
Good evening, directors. We'll have a brief finance report this evening. I will start with the strike team reimbursement update. Our net receivable outstanding for strike team is $19,834. OES continues to make payments, with our most recent payment being coming on April 4th for $58,000. Next slide, please, Marcia. Tunnel East Bay Hills financial update. The project budget was $6.3 million. We have invoiced to CAL FIRE through 12/31/23, $2.1 million, and we have received payments from CAL FIRE of $1.1 million. Our outstanding receivable to date is $952,542. That is the fourth quarter 23 invoice, which has been approved by CAL FIRE, and we're just waiting for the payment to process. The first quarter 24 expenses not yet billed to CAL FIRE are 138,482 for total expenses outstanding of $1,091,024. Again, the invoice for fourth quarter 23 was submitted to CAL FIRE on January 31st, and the first quarter 24 invoice will be submitted in April for $138,000. Treasury bill update. The district now has $18,515,000 invested in treasury bills. The maturity timeline is listed below, and staff continues to project cash flows to determine the amount of reinvestment available when treasury bills mature. That concludes my report, unless anyone has any questions.
This is
Director Jokers.
just one quick one. I noticed that it looks like the coupons on these are actually going up a little bit from last time. I think that they were closer to just 5%, I think, before. So that also, positive news for us as far as how much cash we're going to get out of it. And I noticed we're going out beyond, it used to be only up to the end of the fiscal year. Now we've gone beyond that. Just great.
Those numbers are looking good. Should we go on to any other questions or comments? Human resource.
Good evening, directors. Tonight, I have a brief recruitment and employee change update. For firefighter paramedic trainee, the 5 trainees attending the Confire Academy are on track to graduate on May 20th. In addition, we have a 6th trainee that is on track to start the academy at Alameda City on March 20th as well. The promotional fire exam was hosted this last week. Firefighter paramedic Travis Dooley was promoted to engineer paramedic 2 on April 15th. And in regards to the fuels mitigation specialist, recruitment was conducted and interviews hosted in March, and we hired a new fuels mitigation specialist on April 8th, Roberto Sanchez. And unless there are any questions, that concludes my HR update.
Thank you.
I do have a
Director
question. Can you ensure that the board knows about the graduation, the time and place, and if we're able to attend, to kind of invite us?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, 7.4C, Fire Marshal?
Good evening, directors. Fire prevention's been pretty steady and busy this past month. Focus for the inspection team has been the junipers. And then our inspector's been working with St. Mary's College and our schools on our e-occupancy inspections. You notice on the sheet, we don't have any first or second inspections for the schools. We're into our 3rd and 4th inspections with them. Really starting to see a lot of progress, and the education's paying off with the school staff. Our 2 inspections with the dorms at St. Mary's, same thing. We had 4 additional first inspections, but that 15 pages that we initially saw when we started, we're down to just 4 and 5 pages. Again, a lot of education has gone into it, and we really saw a drop off this month. We didn't get the numbers in time to make the board packet, but the false alarm and nuisance alarm responses to St. Mary's College was noticeably different this month. And I believe wholeheartedly that was in part due to our education and working with their staff and them fixing some of the issues that have been identified.
That's excellent news. I was going to ask, what do you attribute that to? Because it's been a problem longstanding, but it looks like we're making good progress then. Any questions or comments?
How have they resolved it? Is it technology? I mean, are they changing?
I believe, sir, they've hired a consultant, and their consultant has gone in there with them, with their facility staff, and they're making some changes to the systems. And I think they're also educating the residents of the dorms. In our inspections, when we get in there, we're noticing some of the items that will cause those nuisance alarm, the fan blades, the ceiling fans next to the smoke detectors, that if they're cooking or something, if the smoke detector or the fans aren't set in the right direction, it'll pull the smoke right into the alarms.
And that progress is being made without a big investment in upgraded hardware. I imagine that's good news for on theirs.
My understanding.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions or comments?
Is that the end of the report?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So, juniper and bamboo, on your report, I see, 15 citations. No, 15, yes, 15 violations. So, I'm just curious to know how we're doing on that. Because I remember several months ago, we got an update hearing about, at the time, there were hundreds. And I remember there was a comment made either by you or Chief Winiker that there's some people who just won't comply. Most people are complying. And personally, when I drive around the district, I'm looking, like all of us probably are, and citizens are looking. And I still see that there is some. And there's one particular one I pass almost every day, bamboo on Moraga Way. And, I don't need to tell you the address, but I just wonder generally, how's it going on that piece, which, was kind of a controversial in its own way.
Working with the folks and educating them, the people that understand have removed it. We're dealing with the folks right now that have dug their heels in and really don't want to remove it. We had a phone call today of a property owner that I removed 9 feet, I'm not going to 10 feet. And it's like, we listen to them, but at the end of the day, the ordinance is 10 feet and that's what we need, 10 feet. And we've waived a lot of the citation fees, that's the attention getter for folks. And we unapologetically enforce that. And then when they do the work, hey, we're happy to waive that because that's our goal is to get the work done. But yeah, we're in that group of folks right now that they're digging their heels in and they don't want to comply.
So at some point, they're going to get cited. Have we cited that? We haven't cited it all yet?
No, most properties that were originally given the notice have either complied or they're in the $100 and $200 citation. We have had a number of properties that have reached out and said, hey, I can't get a contractor for 2 months. So we're granting extensions in those cases.
Are you aware of the property I'm talking about in Moraga Way?
No, sir.
I'll give you the number when, and I just pass it every day. So, and I have a couple other questions. Go ahead. On your administrative citation report, I had a few questions on that. So, just reviewing the report, I've been looking at it, month after month. So could you explain what is Corte Royale? Is that a street or is that a
Yes, sir.
facility of some kind?
That is a street in the Campo Lindo neighborhood, sir. We had issues with that property. There were numerous dead trees, I think 4 to 5 dead Monterey pine trees in the backyard. Initially noticed the gentleman through the pre-citation process. He got back to us and said he believes his tree vendor caused the trees to die and he was in litigation. So it became a big issue where Mr. Holtzman got involved because the property owner's attorney was also involved. We have just recently found out within the last 2 months, the trees are down. And the property owner contacted us and said he wanted a waiver of all the fees, and I believe he was over $1,000 in fines, but the trees weren't standing, but they were still down in his property. It took him another month or so. He got the dead tree material out of his backyard, so that's why you'll see the case under GoGov status. The case is closed because the violations are no longer present. And data ticket status, they're still open because we still have outstanding fines that he hasn't paid.
So you're going to require the payment or he can come in here and have a hearing in front of us? Okay.
In this case, what I traditionally do, and I work with Chief Winiker on this, is if it's $100 citation, $200 citation, we'll generally waive those unless there's some extenuating circumstances. Once we get to the 500, the amount of staff time that's been consumed with everything, I will take that to chief for his decision, or we will have them come to the board for a hearing.
And I have a few others I want to ask. So when it says GoGov status and it says closed, that's in your system? Is that what that means? It's just
Sir,
closed in the system, it's taken care of, and we still have the citations? Is that?
GoGov is the computer software system that we use. So we close a case, open a case, we have cases on hold. So there should be three statuses: closed, hold, or open. A case on hold might be that they've requested an extension or they've requested modification, or example of the 2308 fuel break cases, we put all those on hold pending the outcome of the litigation on our fuel break ordinance.
What does FTB question mark mean?
That is the Franchise Tax Board.
Oh.
So our third-party collector. Okay.
So I think there's one other one I wanted to ask about. And I think I understand it now. So Camino Don Miguel, responsible party is it's a trust company. And those are still all open notices. So I guess they haven't complied yet. It's ongoing, and it's not a private ownership of that property. So
It is a undeveloped parcel in Orinda, sir. We were just about to the point last year of me getting with the chief and saying, hey, do we want to now do lien funded work on this property? We initially noticed them for violations. There's no structure on it, so no defensible space, but the district abatement ordinance for property under an acre in size. And then the 2308, we stopped with that litigation, but they had also in this process brought plans to us for potential building a structure on that. So that changed a little bit of the requirements. Then those plans got withdrawn. So pending the outcome of 2308, we will probably, I will discuss with chief whether we bring this to a district funded abatement hearing.
this has been going on for almost, just about a year and a half. I mean, since the beginning, December 20, yeah. Okay. That's good by me. I think I understand this report better now. Thanks.
So last year, I know we did a lot of work up in the north part of Orinda, those red areas and then now that are green areas. But a lot of them, just when I drive by, I look and see a fair amount of shrubbery and that sort of thing right up next to the houses that's not trimmed up to foot and it's not 2 feet back and all that. And so, as I understand it, that's one of the really critical things that, I mean, it's great to have the trees all trimmed up, but the 2 feet is, how you save the building at the end of the day. Are we planning on going back to those people? Because I don't think they kind of ever got there, even though we count them as being green now. Are we planning on truly enforcing the box basically?
Yes, sir. When staff goes out for the inspections, that is one of the things they're directed to enforce, is that 2 foot non-combustible zone. So if there's areas we got to last year that we need to do a drive through again, I will absolutely have the team do that.
I have one quick question. When we have these investigations that take months, maybe even years, and amount to over $1,000 in fines, is there a way of reconstructing how much staff time we've actually put into that? Either through some software or some estimate?
Yes, sir. GoGov does allow us to put each staff member that touches the case. There's a box that we can put, hey, I spent an hour on this. I spent 15 minutes on it. We are able to track that.
Any other questions?
No, I think it sounds like what you're doing when you do that and you don't waive some of the fees, kind of look at it and say, well, look, we spent this many hours and, so if you would have solved it in the first place, we wouldn't have charged the money, but charging me by the hour for our time to enforce the rules, and that makes sense to me. So I like that.
And that might be something that we take into consideration if it's brought to our attention that they want, it's brought to us as an appeal and they're asking for relief of $1,000 in fines. And we say, hey, you spent $5,000 of our staff's time. One of the criteria, it wouldn't be determinative, but it certainly would be something for us to take into consideration. Any other comments or questions?
I have, how much, most of the time, these end up waive the fees for compliance, once they bring it into compliance. Do we ever collect fees?
Yes, sir. We collect fines quite frequently. Our third-party data ticket does that for us. And, excuse me, we have received money from the franchise tax board for fines that weren't paid.
That would be in the budget somewhere, right, Gloria? On the fee.
Yes, the fees are in the general fund, and it's called the administrative citation fee, and we've collected $39,000 this fiscal year already.
Any other questions? Good, thank you. Let's move on to 7.4B, Tunnel East Hills Fuel Budget.
Good evening, directors. Quick report on the Tunnel East Bay Hills fuel break. We're finishing the first quarter. We're getting the billing documents and the quarterly report put together to send off to CAL FIRE. Crews stopped last month, once we hit kind of those areas where those time frames where we were getting rain because we were trying to do pile burning. We have approximately 70 piles left to burn before the grass changes. Up there, we're looking to bring back our project coordinator first week of May. He and I will get together. We'll look at the areas that we have to finish on, and we will get the crews back out working either that first week of May or the second week of May, and looking to have this completed by the October-November timeframe.
Questions?
Where's that going to be, approximately, what area?
We're just finishing up in Wilder. The big piece that's coming up is Flicker Ridge up behind the community of Canyon. We knew that was gonna, take some time, and we wanted to schedule that towards the last 6 to 9 months of the grant so we can get in there and do our due diligence.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, let's move on to 7.4E, the Home Hardening Grant Program.
Just a real quick update on the home hardening grant program. We had distribution on Friday, April 12th, and Saturday, the 13th. We handed out gutter guard to 107 residents. We still have 47 that still need to come pick up their material. I'll be working with Chief and Dennis to reschedule a block of time for folks to come in and do that. We've already received, I think it was 5 or 6 phone calls today of people that said, hey, we missed Friday or Saturday, when can we come pick it up? So we want to get that out to them.
Are we still getting requests for vents? How's that? How's the vent program?
Vents has definitely slowed down, sir. The majority of the requests now are for the gutter guard. But we did have the Orinda Woods HOA ask for 4 rolls of vent mesh. So we had enough to be able to support that. I think there were 50-foot rolls. So total 200 feet was given out.
And then go out and measure their gutters also. I think 29 houses submitted the file and had 4 more that came in just a couple days ago, after they submitted that. So almost 5,000 feet of gutters that they're looking for.
Great.
But that's going to be a drop ship thing. Instead of having them come in, they're actually going to just send it all in one package out, on a pallet out to those guys, I think. I talked to the Moraga Country Club also. They've got 500 homes. I think maybe 200 of them already have gutter guards, but because the HOA is responsible for maintaining the gutters and cleaning them out every year, they look at it and say, terrific, we're going to have the same people install, clean the gutters and at the same time install the gutter guards on the next 300 houses. And then they won't have to hire them anymore. So that's a good thing. Which is the way everybody ought to think about it to some extent.
Any other questions or comments from board members? 7.4F, operations. Welcome, Chief Lambert.
Good evening, directors, members of the public. My name is Lucas Lambert. I'll be giving tonight's operations report. Beginning on April 10th and 11th, MOFD hosted the promotional exam for the engineer's position. We had a total of 5 participants take the exam that consisted of written exercise, cones course, driving course, commercial vehicle pre-trip, pumping evolutions with hydraulic calculations. This test was proctored by engineers and captains from outside agencies and assisted with MOFD personnel as our HR manager, Christine, had mentioned. Next slide. Here's another look at one of the evolutions. It's part of the cones course that was required during the exam. This portion of the test, candidates were expected to maneuver the Type 1 fire engine through the cones course in an offset pattern and without touching them. They were rated on their driving skills, maneuver skills, and with that, I'd like to recognize by name staff members that did assist, including Battalion Chief Steve Gailing, Captain Brad Nygaard, Captain Mike Marquardt, Captain Clayton Hoover, Engineer Matt Lopez, Engineer Anthony Gergerovic, Engineer Chris Matthews, and of course, members of our Human Resources Department, HR Manager Christine, and Office Specialist Mona. I want to recognize them specifically because this is a large lift from our organization that, as you can tell by the names and assistance, it is very labor intensive and was fortunately very successful. Next slide. And as Christine had mentioned, I'm pleased to announce the top candidate of that testing process is Engineer Paramedic 2, Travis Dooley, that will be assigned with me on Station 45 A shift. So congratulations to Engineer Dooley for his success and participation in the test. Next slide. Here's one example that I included in the slideshow this evening because it's something that is not often thought of. It's this a garbage truck with a fire inside of the garbage truck in the compactor. On Wednesday, April 10th at approximately 09:45 hours, our crews responded to the St. Mary's Gardens neighborhood for a garbage truck that was actually on fire. Upon arrival, crews encountered a garbage truck with active fire in the rear of the truck in the compactor area. Fortunately, because of the fast actions and quick response by our crews and firefighters, we were able to contain the contents of the fire to the area of origin before it moved into the actual physical truck. Crews remained on scene to fully extinguish the fire and before it was turned over to representatives of the company following the extinguishment. Next slide.
Can I ask a question about that? Is there any idea what started the fire?
Yeah, a good question. So we do cause and origin and try to determine what it is. And in a situation like that, it is very difficult. Along with that, everything that you put into your garbage, along with things that you may not, should not you specifically, but the public,
Like hot ashes from a fireplace?
Certainly, and further discussion with the supervisor and company that came out to determine best practice and a reminder of what their policies are.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. On Saturday, April 13th, MOFD participated with the city of Orinda in a first annual Touch a Truck public event. Some rain in the forecast did not prevent our young admirers from engaging with our firefighters, where they were able to come out and see one of the many vehicles in an event. And I'll note that there is a garbage truck on their flyer as well, but I'm biased. We believe that our trucks are better. Next slide.
Right.
If you missed the Orinda event, to note, we have two other similar events that folks can attend, both in the Briones area and Moraga, with the dates attached. Next slide. And just for notification, this time of year, it is not uncommon for us to see our public enjoying the outdoors and many of the open spaces that are available to us. We do, however, want to remind our public to be careful when outside. Over the last month since we last spoke, we've seen an increase in responses, what we term as limited access rescues. This type of dispatch is typically somebody that has become ill or injured in remote areas. I want to recognize a special thanks to our team at Rescue One Foundation for affording us the opportunity to improve our response. That's collaborated with the side-by-side Kubota that you see before you. They recently purchased a skid mount unit, the one that you see just below the UTV, that will assist us in extricating patients in remote locations and delivering patients and people to more definitive care in our ambulance and then further to hospitals. So again, want to recognize the efforts by the Rescue One Foundation and affording us that opportunity. This unit is still in transit, and we look forward to receiving it. Next slide. And last, again, please save the date for Saturday, May 4th, from 11 to 1 at our Orinda Open House at Station 45. We will be opening our doors to the public to celebrate our annual open house in Orinda. We look forward to seeing everybody out there, and please remind everybody that this date is coming very quickly. So look forward to having everybody out and opening our doors. This concludes my operations report, pending any questions.
Thanks, Chief Lambert. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Yeah. 7.4G, upcoming calendar and events in the next 30 days.
Item was added at the request of the director at the last meeting and included in our agenda.
Very helpful. I think good addition to our agenda. I don't know that we need any comments or questions on that unless there are about the details of the events. Otherwise, I'll move on to the consent agenda.
Onto the consent agenda, we'll check and see if there's any public comment for the announcement items. We do not have any hands raised or any public comment.
So consent agenda is,
And then we can open public comment for the consent agenda.
let's do so.
We do not have any hands raised or any public comment.
I'd make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Director Danziger?
Aye.
Director Hassler?
Aye.
Director Jex?
Aye.
Director Morgans?
Aye.
President Romer?
Aye. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item 9.1, the first reading and introduction of ordinance number 24-02, an ordinance of the Moraga-Orinda Fire Protection District of Contra Costa County establishing and adopting a schedule of fees and collections policies for ambulance transport and superseding ordinance number 0.01.
Just before we begin the staff report, I just want to make note of the section 2.6 rules and procedures that we had adopted last month, which we incorporated into this one.
Thank you.
We'll take public comment after board discussion, and then if there is a motion, we will go directly into deliberation and the vote.
Good evening, directors. Background for this, emergency medical services are partially paid for by ambulance transport cost recovery fees and non-transport emergency medical service cost recovery fees. The district ambulance service agreement with Contra Costa County EMS includes a provision for an annual modification to emergency medical services. Staff recommends the board increase ambulance fees as follows in the staff report. Below in the second box item there on the staff report is the comparison of emergency medical service fees from other agencies within the county. Staff recommends the board introduce and waive the reading of ordinance number 24-02 and ordinance of the Moraga-Orinda Fire Protection District.
Open it for discussion. Discussion and questions of staff by board members. Pardon me?
We discussed this last.
We did, but I think we still need to open it in case anybody has any additional comments. So hearing no questions or comments, I think we can invite comments or questions from the public relative to this agenda item.
We do not have any public comment.
And I move we waive the reading of ordinance 24-02 and
Adopt the first reading.
adopt the first reading.
Second.
Director Danziger?
Aye.
Director Hassler?
Aye.
Director Jex?
Aye.
Director Jorgens?
Aye.
President Romer?
Aye. Okay. Agenda item 9.2, the long-range financial forecast, April 2024.
Good evening, directors. I have 2 slides for this item tonight. The long-range forecast was reviewed in detail at the March board meeting. Subsequently, Cesara provided updated 6-year employer cost projections based on 2023 investment earnings of 9%. The updated projections have been used in the 2 scenarios. A new scenario B was prepared, which projects property tax revenue increases of 2.5% throughout the forecast. This graph illustrates projected unrestricted fund balance for the next 10 years based on scenarios A, which is property tax revenue growth of 3.5%, and scenario B with property tax revenue growth of 2.5%. Staff requests board direction regarding the long-range financial forecast. This concludes the staff report.
I'm sorry. There were a number of things that you guys highlighted. I gotta get my glasses on that I'm not sure, that were the assumptions, I guess maybe in the budget actually, that was the first year of this and then it grows from there. And I think there were a couple things that I wasn't sure were necessarily consistent within the forecast. One was, it says that we have a $750,000 assumed interest income from our bond, well, from the investments that we have, additional bonds. And that, what rate did we assume we were earning on the bonds during that time?
So we're on track to earn about $756,000 in the current fiscal year. So I use $750,000 throughout the whole thing. So it would be the similar interest rate environment that we're currently in.
So the challenge I think I have with that is from a long-term forecast, if we're assuming a 3.5, or we're assuming 5% there, I think most of the inflation that we assume for other items for, not salaries, but all the other expenses that we have is probably more like 3%, if I had to guess. And those 2 things should be linked. So if we're assuming we're earning 5% on our bonds, that means there's something like 5% inflation. So we ought to have a higher inflation rate. We have to make sure the 2 are consistent with each other. This last year was, at least people thought it was an anomaly, and they were assuming interest rates were going to be coming back down to, inflation was going to come back down to 2%. That's what the Fed was hoping, but that didn't happen. And so now they're wondering if they're going to cut rates. But the reason they're not going to cut rates and we're going to be able to keep earning our 5% is because there's more inflation than they have been predicting. So we need to take that into account. We can't have it both ways. You can't get the benefit of the interest and the high inflation from your bonds and not assume it in your costs. So we either need to change our costs in the inflation rate we're using there or reduce this number, in my opinion. And it doesn't matter, we should, but they have to be consistent. That's one. I can keep going, but do we want to talk about that?
Does anybody else have something coming on that first item that Director Jarvis has raised? Go ahead.
And then we keep going here. There were a couple other items in here. One was, I think we could do this during the budget, but I think in all of this, we have an assumption of a deputy fire chief position and also an office, additional office specialist position in emergency preparedness. And, we can leave those in and talk about them in detail later, but those are things that I don't think we've really had any discussion about yet, but we're currently baking them into the long-range financial forecast. We should just be aware of that, which your memo did do. But the biggest thing I think is the question about whether if we really believe that we're going to earn, and I don't think $750,000 forever, because I don't think we're going to have that kind of inflation. I think that maybe next year, but I think after that, it ought to go back down to earning, a couple percent on our bonds, not 5%. I don't think it should ever go back to earning effectively zero, which it was, because I just don't think that's going to happen in the future. But I would argue that after a couple of years, it's not going to be 5% anymore.
Other comments, Director Danziger?
Well, on the long range financial plan, from what you said, there's a lot of assumptions made. I always have this, we make this assumption of a 3% salary raise, for instance, which to me seems very conservative in light of the current environment. So, I think we just need, to me, this is a guide, and it adjusts, as the real numbers come in. I don't have a problem with the interest income of 750, just to use something. I don't know how else you would do it.
Or to do it forever, I think is the problem. It isn't the $750,000 is the issue. The question is, because it should be a function of what our balance is on our, so I assume it wasn't 750 and then just inflated. It should be an interest rate based on how much money we have, which I assume is how you did it, but maybe not. But it should certainly be, because it looks like we have a vastly growing balance. And so we ought to have a lot more. We ought to set the interest rate and earn that on whatever balance we have. Is that the way we did it?
No, I just used $750,000 throughout the whole thing.
And make it based on how much we have in our bank account, which seems like a good thought, because we're forecasting we have $1 zillion in our bank account, which at the end of one of those, it had $60 million. I'm not sure I believe that, mind you, but we should at least think about earning an interest rate on the correct balance as we go forward.
I would agree. I think it's, you can look out maybe 2 years but definitely the trend more likely is to reduce the rate. Instead of 5% next year, it may be 4%. And depending on what the Fed does, it may end up, So I think I would trend it downward, at least for the next 5 years.
I would trend it down to maybe 3%, which I think is optimistic. 2 or 3 years, 3%, but it needs to be based on how much we're anticipating now on our balance sheet, because we should be earning money on our balance.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I have clear board direction. So I will do a more in-depth projection of the investment earnings, and I'm going to use a 5% rate of return, and I'm going to trend it down to 3% over how many years? And then do I just leave it flat at 3%, or do you want a more trending because it's a 10-year forecast?
Well, at the moment, Sicera, for example, has an assumed rate of interest on their cash balances, and that's built into their return models. And they have a 3.5% rate of return, I think, on a 3.5% inflation salary increase baked into their models, if I remember correctly. So number one, we ought to use whatever they're currently using to make sure that our OPEB and other balances are based on the same assumptions that Cicera is having. So instead of 3% for our models, we ought to probably put in 3.5 because that's the kinds of inflations that they're assuming in that. So we have a whole bunch of numbers in there that are based on those assumptions, and we ought to probably be consistent with them because the numbers for pensions are, almost half of our expenses. So.
I mean, except Cicera that's used for measuring the pension liability and for all those calculations, but that's not, we're invested in treasury bills. So that's not what Cicera is invested in. So that's why I need to know the 5% trending down to 3% and then just leave it at 3%, assuming we're just going to keep investing in treasury bills. And do you think treasury bills are going to stay at 3%, or what does the board wish over 10 years? What do you think is going to happen with treasury bills?
I agree. I would say either 3.5 or 3%. And to be conservative, I think it's better to go with 3%. So 5% this year, 4% next year, and 3% the year after that. But does anybody else? But Dr. Danziger?
Yeah, and 3% or 4% of what? It can't just be.
Well, we can look back in the last year or two and see how much money we were able to keep invested on average over the year based on the balances that we had. So, what percentage of our, because, it changes over the year, and I don't know whether it's linear or not, but so I would think that whatever our average balance is that we should have in the bank, which we should know roughly what percentage of our end of year fund has been able to be invested for the year. That ought to be a pretty straightforward number to figure out.
Do you think it's safe to assume that over the next 5 to 10 year period, we can assume that it's going to be about what it has been this year?
The percentage.
No, I'm talking about I think Director Danziger makes a good point. It's percentage of what? Can we all, you think it's too conservative?
If we have a general fund balance of $20 million, we're only able to invest, pick a number, half of that for the whole year, because you get it in at one point and it's gone, almost gone at the end. But the balance is increasing over time. So if we got to invest $10 million, half of that for the whole year on average, we ought to be able to know what percentage of our general fund balance we're normally able to invest, and then just take that percentage and multiply it times our general fund balance going forward and then multiply by the interest rate. That should be the investable money we have every year.
Is that something that you can do? I mean, can you?
I think I have enough direction that I can do some calculations. Yes.
But the other point I made was, if we're assuming 3% for our, because I think we always have for some random reason, 3% for our salary increases, and Cicera is using 3.5%, which I think is what they do, to be consistent, because they're using that on all their pension calculations. We should use, and their rates of return and everything else, we should be using the same base number as they use to be consistent with so otherwise you're going to have two different kinds of assumptions driving huge amounts of money in your model, and they should be consistent. And I agree that 3.5 is probably not the right number either, but that's what they're using, so it's.
I think I can go 3.5.
Director Jackson, 3.5% is okay. I concur.
So instead of a 3%, so the forecast assumes a 3% salary increases for safety and non-safety positions. So the board wants to use 3.5%. Is that correct?
What Cicera is using. And again, this is, obviously, as we have negotiations, those numbers potentially change one way or the other. Who knows where they're going to go, but we can at least be consistent with the rest of the model that we have at the moment and with what Cicera is assuming.
Any other items? Director Jorgens?
Those are the big ones that I saw.
Any other comments or criticisms? Okay.
So what's the plan for this going forward, I guess, is that, so normally you're going to bring it back again next time, and we're going to hopefully for approval at that point, or is that the normal plan?
So so the board doesn't formally vote to approve it. So it came last month, the first time, and direction was requested. And the direction was to prepare a second scenario, then which I did. And so then I brought it back this time. And so now there's more direction to make additional changes. So then I'll bring it back a third time next month.
We did get the update doing the property tax calculation at 2.5% as well as 3.5%. And we could see on that graph what a huge difference that makes over time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, that's another thing that at least temporarily is these things usually work themselves out. But, you know, if we're assuming a 5% inflation rate and a 5% interest rate, a lot fewer people get to afford houses when you have a 7% mortgage than they do when you have a, you know, 3.5% or 4% mortgage, which is where we were the last lot of, I mean, maybe 10 years we've been at those levels. And so that's why we're seeing a slowdown. In the report, it said that we had, I don't know, 30% or 25% fewer houses turning over. And that reduces the growth in our rate because there are fewer and fewer that are getting marked to market with Prop 13. And so, you know, because they were held low at Prop 13 when they sell, then they get marked to market. And there's less of that going on. That is just going to lower that 3.5, 3.59 was this year. That's going to have a tendency to lower that, but there's a lag because we're always, you know, the government's always a little bit behind in how they tax. So that's going to start hitting us in the future.
Public comments, questions?
So we do not have any hands raised or any public comment.
So I think we can entertain a motion.
I don't think,
On, right?
yeah,
That's not
motion's not required for this item, so we
All
will
right.
go ahead and go to item 9.
Okay. Item 9.3 is the public budget workshop. Development of annual operating budget fiscal year 2025 and board direction regarding the draft budget, general fund discretionary expenditure budget, staffing, including the addition of 1 deputy fire chief position and 1 office specialist position, capital funds, capital projects fund, Tunnel East Bay fuel break fund, and fire risk reduction grant fund budgets.
A draft budget has been prepared. This is the first step in the public budget process. Tonight is a public workshop to discuss the draft budget. Based on board direction in this workshop, the proposed budget will be brought back to the board in May for additional public input and additional board direction. The budget is scheduled for adoption in June. The draft budget includes general fund revenue of $36.7 million, expenditures of $33.3 million, a transfer to the capital projects fund of $3 million, which would result in a general fund budgeted surplus of $410,000. Looking at total general fund revenue, which is projected to increase $1.3 million. The revenue increase is primarily due to property tax revenue, which is projected to increase 3.96% based on estimates provided by HDL. Ambulance revenue is projected to increase 5% based on a fee increase. Investment earnings are budgeted at $750,000 due to board direction to invest beyond LAIF in treasury bills in order to take advantage of increased interest rates. Total general fund expenditures are projected to be $33.3 million. Salaries and benefits expenditures are $28.7 million. The district is currently in ongoing labor negotiations with 2 bargaining groups. Labor agreements expire on June 30, 2024. No salary or benefit changes have been included in the draft budget pending completion of negotiations. There are 2 new positions included in the proposed budget, a deputy fire chief position and 1 office specialist. Cesara costs have been set by the Cesara board and will increase 10.5% or $1.5 million. An OPEB contribution is included at the full actuarially determined contribution. Also, a pension rate stabilization trust fund contribution is included in the amount of $1.2 million, which uses a discount rate of 6.25%. And operating expenditures are projected to increase 15% to $4.6 million. For authorized positions, I draw your attention to operations, where it's proposed to add 1 deputy fire chief position, and to emergency preparedness, where it's proposed to change from having only a part-time position to also having a full-time employee of office specialist. At the end of the presentation, I'll request board direction regarding the proposed additional positions. Many of the district's expenditures are required based on contractual, operational, or legal requirements. The non-discretionary expenditures are detailed on the slide and total $29.4 million. Some expenditures.
Can I was gonna say, can I take exception to the other, next slide? So we have, computer equipment and special expenses and computer software and vehicle repairs. I mean, kind of those things are discretionary, but you can, I'm not sure I would necessarily use those words. The ones at the top I agree with, but the rest of it, building maintenance, I mean, there might be some of it that's required, but they aren't huge numbers, but I'm not sure that's the category I'd put them in.
Agree. And this is not the non-discretionary slide. Marcia, can you back up 2 slides,
Okay.
please, I think?
Maybe we're talking on the.
There we
on the
go.
wrong
This is,
slide.
this is the
Okay.
non-discretionary expenditures here. This is where we have salaries and benefits, workers' comp, the retiree, medical, those ones. So there's the non-discretionary.
Okay,
Sorry for the
good. Okay,
confusion.
good.
Yes, you're right. Okay, next slide. Sorry. Here we go. So these are these are not mandatory expenditures. And some are continuation of effort. Okay, so for instance, the pension trust contribution, the home hardening grants, the fuels mitigation staff, those are optional things to do at the board's discretion, but the district has consistently been doing them. And there's also new discretionary expenditures on here, which include, for instance, the deputy fire chief position at a total cost of $494,000, as well as the additional office specialist. So there's a lot on this slide.
Wait a minute. The emergency preparedness /CERT is $287,544. I thought that was about half of that. What does that all include?
The emergency, what's in emergency CERT and emergency preparedness?
Yes.
It includes the half-time, part-time position, as well. Let's see, let me go look at the budget here.
That's for 2 positions, not 1.
Is our discussion open now, or are we gonna?
Oh, sorry.
I mean,
I just
yeah,
wanted to bring that up.
I have
before-
questions, but I was hoping that. we
Okay,
can-
well, bearing that in mind, if you want to finish your presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
All right, and then we
Sorry,
can
I
look at
didn't-
the budget.
I didn't mean to speak out of
Yeah,
order. I just,
Okay, all right, we'll come back to your question, President Romer. All right, so next slide, please, Marcia. All right, so this is a new slide I added this year to highlight significant differences between the current year expenditures and the proposed budget. First, a significant difference is retirement contributions, which are projected to increase 1.5 million due to the Cicera rate increase and projected full staffing and those 2 additional new positions. For building maintenance, the district is experiencing increased maintenance needs at administration and all fire stations except Station 43. For workers' compensation, I skipped that one. Insurance costs have not been finalized. However, I anticipate receiving the cost by then next month, so that number will be refined when I bring the budget back next month. So I included a significant increase in the cost because of increased claims. Vehicle repair costs are also projected to increase 50,000. For computer software, we need to purchase new software for electronic patient care records and for new plan review software that will be used in fire prevention. Other special expenses are projected to increase for additional fuels mitigation projects. And for computer equipment, we need to replace modems and apparatus. So that's what's driving that increase this year. So the draft budget includes capital projects expenditures listed on the slide, which total 1.4 million. The draft budget also includes a transfer out of the general fund into the capital projects fund of $3 million to accumulate reserves to pay cash for the Station 41 administration construction project. The Capital Projects Fund projects a surplus of $2.45 million and available reserves of $8.6 million at June 30, 2025, which is as illustrated on this chart right here, which shows reserves. The purple section of the graph is our general fund reserves, which would increase $410,000 in 2025. The red and green sections represent the pension and OPEB trust funds. These reserve funds are also increasing due to annual contributions and investment earnings. This is the last slide. Staff requests board direction, please, regarding the 2025 proposed budget.
Now I guess we get to ask questions.
Yes. I don't know that I need to go first, but I have a few questions. Just
if you want to.
yeah, I can go first. I have a
it's-
few, and then maybe some more. But
It's helpful when you're, so sometimes when you turn your head, that's when. I
Gotcha.
lose-
Gotcha. Okay. So I'll start with just a few questions. I was going to ask one that President Romer asked too. The emergency preparedness cert line of 287,544. Could you just explain? I know it goes for a halftime position, but what else is in that?
Yes, so I would draw your attention to your board packet, page 177 in the lower right corner of the board packet. That shows the emergency preparedness proposed budget. So it has, let's see, I guess I'll wait till you get there. Page 177. Are you there? Okay. So total expenditures for the emergency preparedness cert are $404,544. So that is primarily up in salaries and benefits. So there's, you can see for the permanent salaries of $86,000, that would be for the office specialist. Then the hourly salaries of $97,637, that's for the part-time hourly position. And then the big driver in there is the part-time hourly person can do incident management team work. And so there's a budget of $130,000 of overtime for that. So that is how that incident management team costs are get into the $400,000 for that.
So is that like, I'm not really sure what that is. So is that like if we have a deployment or incidents internal, what is that?
Right, the part-time emergency preparedness coordinator goes out on fires and does incident management work.
We get reimbursed for that, correct?
Correct.
By how much? 100%, 90%?
More than 100%.
Much more than 100%.
I've got to see, well, it's based on his hourly rate plus the administrative percentage. I think there's about a 20% administrative surcharge on there, plus a vehicle cost.
That sounds like a good deal for us.
Yeah.
So we want to keep that
Yeah.
deal going,
Yeah.
right?
So
So that's going to offset the biggest cost there.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I agree.
And so how, go ahead.
My understanding is that the CERT program provides service to all of La Morinda, which is Orinda, Moraga, and Lafayette. Does Lafayette put in some funds for this as well?
No, they no longer do. They did for many years, but they don't anymore.
So is the service that we provide, like I've done CERT training and there were people in my class from Lafayette, do their fees cover their being in that course?
You don't get any fees from CERT classes that I'm aware of.
I had to pay for CERT. I mean, I had to pay. I paid, I think, $200 something, right? You did CERT, right? I thought don't we pay to be in CERT?
I don't think you paid to Moraga-Orinda Fire District.
Okay, so we provide service to Lafayette, residents of Lafayette, but do they put any funds into this program or we just,
Not that I'm aware of, no.
so we're just doing this as a courtesy to train Lafayette residents?
I don't know. You'd have to ask someone else about
Okay.
that
I'd
theory.
like to get,
Back when we a few months ago, they announced that they were stopping the payment. And I think it's because Lafayette hired their own person. And I guess my answer would be, if it's, if it's the Moraga-Orinda and we got Orinda and Moraga, the 2 out of 3, I would tell them that, they either need to be supplying some of the funding or at least some of the training people so that there's somebody involved in it adding some value, or why are we training people in Lafayette?
Yeah, I remember, that was probably like a year ago that they stopped the funding, and I remember that too, and I'd just like to bring that back maybe for next month and find out what, how that works. So.
Somebody needs to talk to the folks in Lafayette and say, well, if you still want to have your people participating in the program, what are you going to do? Put the ball in their court. I agree.
I just do a couple, anyone else on that one, or we're good on that? Okay, let me just ask a couple others. Body cameras. That's new, right? No?
It is.
Yeah, new.
I agree.
Yes, we do not currently have body cameras.
So is this body cameras for prevention staff only?
Yes, sir. It's for the prevention inspector.
Could you elucidate a little bit on the need for body cameras?
Yes, sir. It's something Chief and I have discussed last couple budget cycles. We've had a couple incidents where inspectors have gone out to properties and residents have alleged they said one thing, they said my property was in compliance, or they said, an inappropriate term I didn't like, or no, that violation wasn't present when the inspector came out. So body cameras would help us document what was said and what was present at the time. Again, it was something Chief and I have batted around and we wanted to bring to the board to, get some direction on.
Well, I think I would like to have a further information on the use of body cameras. I mean, I
agree.
have a lot of questions I think come to my head, and that I don't think I'm prepared to ask them all right now until we come. But I think later on when we have maybe, well, I can ask right now. I'd just like to have further information on the use of body cameras. What does that entail? I mean, are we going to need a policy, a legal policy? Is this? I mean, I have a million questions, not a million questions, but I have a lot of questions on the use of body cameras. And
I think it changes the interaction that you have on a regular basis with people you're interacting with. I mean, if you want to have a nice friendly dialogue with somebody and you're telling them what's on camera, it ain't going to happen. So,
Absolutely correct, sir. That is, if we did that, the policy would have to go to Mr. Holtzman's team to draft when you wear it, when you don't wear it, what notifications you have to make to the citizen you're talking. There's stuff that has to happen before we just slap body cameras on the inspectors.
taking your lawyer with you. I mean, no offense, but I'm just saying, it changes the dynamic a lot.
Are there other fire departments that are doing that and have done this? And do they notify the resident and get some kind of oral or written permission before they do this? Or is there?
No, sir. If any other fire departments do it, I know, law enforcement does.
Sure. That's been in the works for many years. And I can see the rationale because it's a law enforcement function that the inspectors are providing here. But I do think it's taking a leap that I think we do need to ask some more questions about and anticipate some legal issues. And, even though the $10,000 cost seems reasonable, I think it is something that we need to work through the details before we prove it.
Put that on a future agenda.
I would also like to see more of a description of the deputy fire chief position as well as the office specialist position, just a little bit more a job description. If we have something like that now, just what will they be doing?
Completely agree. Future agenda items. Near term, future agenda items before we get the budget finalized. Yes.
Meeting next month.
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems reasonable.
So I have a couple. So one of the things we have in the budget in general is, we said we're going to allocate X million dollars a year to the capital budget. And often people, there are different philosophies about this, but we have a depreciation schedule for all of our buildings and equipment or whatever. And at the moment, yes, we keep track of that from a financial standpoint, but I haven't seen it in our forecasts. And so often companies, for example, will actually reserve those funds so that, we are kind of doing that, but I don't think we're only thinking about it for the things that are within our little short forecast. Hey, we need a new fire engine, we need a new fire chief truck. There are a few things like that we have building, huge buildings every so often. But the way to forecast that well, and this kind of goes back to the long range financial forecast more than it is for the budget, but usually people put in, you need to have your accumulated depreciation there, so you are funding, so that when all of a sudden, hey, I need a new, and fill in the blank, you've got the money for that because you've been forecasting, you bought the asset, you depreciate it over its useful life, and at the end of the life, you got to buy a new one. So you need to have the money to be able to do that when you get to that point. Just like if you buy a car at home, same kind of thing. Car got old, you got to buy a new car, and you had to save up for it. So we should be forecasting and starting with our probably accumulated depreciation is the amount, and then every year I think it's like $971,000 you got to put away in that fund. Other than just for the things you're going to actually buy that year, you have to keep a reserve fund for the future needs you're going to have. But I'm not sure we're doing that in this year's budget. I think we just put a random, $2 or $3 million into the budget every year, and then we spend whatever we spend because we've got a forecast of, what we have to spend it on.
So the $3 million, so you're right. The long range forecast drives the contribution, the transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund that ends up in the annual budget. So that's where the $3 million came from, because that's been the amount that's been in the forecast for the last several years for this 2025. So the $3 million, where that came from was pretty close to what our old previous pension obligation bond payment was. It escalated to around $3 million. So that's how that was derived, but it was not tied to depreciation.
Now that the bond's paid off, we can erase that from the line item in our budget because that doesn't exist anymore. So.
Oh, so sorry, I'm going to get some clarification. Okay, so do you want to leave the $3 million contribution in the 2025 budget? And then do you want this depreciation work as part of the long range financial forecast?
Part of the budget, I assume, is that we also have an income statement or balance sheet that goes with it, right? So you have to know how much capital you have left at the end of the year and know that you have enough money to fund things. So as part of our balance sheet, it already should be there anyway, because it's an official balance sheet and an income statement. We should have an accumulated depreciation line, but it should educate us on how much we should be building up in our capital funds, because the $3 million is kind of a random number. Otherwise.
I assumed that when we put the 3 million, we were looking at what anticipated expenditures were going to be on Station 41.
And we are, yes.
On an annual basis. And that was part of the rationale of the $3 million.
Yes, that's correct. The long range financial forecast anticipates how much will need to be spent in each year for the significant capital projects like Station 41. And based on the transfers that were in the long range forecast, there will be enough cash to pay for that.
That was, we're putting it aside in the capital.
But those are, I guess my point is, those are for near-term things. And yes, we have a 10-year financial forecast. And I'm saying we need a 25-year forecast. But the way you do it, because by definition, the accountants already do the math for you, because they have a depreciation schedule. And the federal government tells you how long you depreciate things over by law, right? A tax code. So all I'm saying is, in our forecast, because we don't have the replacement of Station 43, because it's not going to happen for 30 years, but the federal government tells you that it lasts 30 years, and we ought to be setting aside the money along the way, a 30th of that if they use straight line, which I think they do. We ought to be setting aside that instead of just looking 2 or 3 years out and saying, oh, hey, we need a new building, because there are a few things that are in our, and the simple assets that depreciate over 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years, the chief's vehicles and ambulances and fun things that have a really short life, those are in a little forecast, but the big things aren't. But we need to be saving up for those things as we go. Otherwise, it's going to show up in the 11th year, we need 2 new buildings and we got a problem. And the easy way to do that is to put your depreciation in every year, in addition to the things you know that are happening that year. That's what most businesses do. I can help you with that offline if you want. Other ones, I got a couple more if you. So the strike team, I thought on the slide, it had a number that was an $800,000 number. Am I remembering that wrong?
I could go back to the slide if you would like me to.
Are you talking about for strike team revenue or the overtime expenditures?
Okay, so it was strike team revenue that was 8 something, because in here, okay. Because we have had, we're assuming a fairly large overtime for strike team this year. It's up a lot from 25s is up a lot from 24s. So, I mean, it's up, 40% or so, 30%. So, why did we decide it was going to be that much higher?
So for strike team, sorry, I'm getting to that page.
Strike team overtime.
Strike team overtime, let's see.
Strike team recovery is 830, page 148.
Okay, so strike team overtime expenditures are 630,000 and the strike team revenue, thank you, on page 148 is 830,000. So, right.
But why did we assume they went up so much?
It's a guess, right? So I'm just trying to get enough in there so that if we did have a big year and we needed it, we wouldn't have to come for an adjustment. So that's why I did 830 revenue and the 630 in overtime.
It's actually something we make money on, so it's actually a positive thing when we have more in there.
Okay, so if the board wants something different, then tell me what you want.
All I'm saying is it's not a conservative thing to do. It's actually you're adding, because we make money on it, it's actually a not conservative. I don't know what word you want to use for that, but it's the opposite of being conservative. It's assuming we have extra revenue.
Strike team revenue dropped dramatically this last year from what it has been.
We had a really wet year, and it was a great year, and there weren't any huge fires. I mean,
I
it was a wonderful
assume
time.
that was because the demand was not there.
Right. There weren't a lot of big fires. And all of a sudden, we're assuming there are, 30% more big fires this year, and that we make money on that. So we're assuming a rosy future for our financials because we're going to make money on having more revenue.
So you're suggesting that we revise that downward to 630,000?
Right, because the good news is if we have to come back and revise it, it means we're going to make more money.
And that's fine. So how low would you like the strike team revenue and overtime expenditures to be?
Salaries, I guess we don't necessarily know this year, but make it go up 5% from last year or something, or whatever our trend has been. We actually did this a couple of years ago. We looked at kind of what the long-term trend was in this number, and it seems to me it was $400,000 or $500,000 in the revenue line. But all of a sudden, it jumped up a lot. So I'd look back at the trend line for the last 5 or 6 years to see what it's been, and then kind of follow the line.
Average of the last 5 years, the kind of thing? I'm not sure.
That kind of thing, yeah. Well, I mean, it's potentially been going up as salaries go up because, even if you have the same number of hours, it goes up a little bit. But so it could be a little bit of a trend, but in general, I'd look at kind of the average and see which way that's going.
I will do that.
And that's conservative budgeting. That's a good point.
I have the same body camera question. Computer software, you said part of it was because we're having to keep track of patient data and things like that. So is that part of the expense that we're billing through to people?
No. Okay, so, right. So one new software that we need for next year is new electronic patient care record software. And so, no, the cost of software is not part of the ambulance recovery costs. Those costs are just based on the time that it takes. And that will be we do have in the budget to do a new fee study. So we're going to do a fee study, which will include the ambulance fees. So we'll look at that as well.
The ambulance fees for for the additional record keeping that's required.
But I don't know, we have to get a consultant in, and then they'll do it based on what state law says how to calculate it and to justify it for cost recovery. So they'll let us know whether we can include patient care record software as a cost in there.
Instead of having to have a whole big study about it.
Periodically, public agencies are required to do cost studies in order to justify their fees under Proposition 218. And if I don't know when the last one was done, but if you let it go on too long, then your fees are subject to challenge. So that's the reason to do a cost study.
Cost study cost, something.
I think it was 20 or 25,000, I thought. So
Even for something like this?
Yeah.
This seems like it's very specific and directed.
Well, I think it's going to be an overall cost study because there might be other things too.
It's not just this.
It's on the whole, we just want to make sure, I hope the objective is to make sure that whatever costs we have, we're as much as possible, legally possible, passing on. Because this doesn't go to our taxpayers, this goes to third parties.
I would just emphasize also, there are many lawyers, and we know we like lawyers, but there are many lawyers who bring these Prop 218 lawsuits. They travel from town to town sort of doing that. And they're very expensive lawsuits to defend, et cetera. So I would argue this is an ounce of prevention.
I'm happy to spend the money but we just need to make sure we do it and then actually follow through on all these kinds, because we're spending a lot of money I'm sure it's great to keep the records, but it's an expense we're having. There were a couple more.
Good.
What is other special department expense that went up $60,000? That's on page 151.
Yes. Okay, I have that. All right. So that's spread across all the different divisions. The big thing, is for additional fuels mitigation projects. So that's going up. So we didn't spend everything on fuels mitigation that was budgeted in 2024. So then we have money in there for next year in fire prevention. So I'm looking, let's see, we're including $110,000 for fuels mitigation in 2025.
Majority of that $50,000 was for the patient software stuff.
So the new patient software. So let's see, the software is detailed. This is on page 169 of the packet, and it's all detailed out there. So the new electronic patient care record software is $25,000, and then the new plan review software is $15,000. And then the rest of it is pretty much annual increases and so forth. Right.
$1,000 per person increase. Wow. And then maintenance on buildings, I guess, again, it went up a lot. Is there something that we aren't doing that all of a sudden we have that kind of maintenance on our buildings? We're going to have some brand new ones. At the same time, for 45, we're spending $1 million to redo it all. So there shouldn't be hardly any maintenance on that building.
Building maintenance is detailed by station in the budget. So I'm looking for the pages on it. One thing that I remember is that, let's see, sorry, let me go to it so that I get it right.
One of the things I know we need to do, I don't think Station 45 meets the fire code at the moment for the exterior hazard abatement. So we should work on that. They have vines growing on their bushes that go all the way to the ground. So
Station 45, building maintenance includes things like annual maintenance on the generators, Electrical maintenance, plumbing, HVAC, the overhead doors, they're usually regularly get out of alignment and so forth. The Plimo vent system regularly. And then there's a miscellaneous, about $10,000. And so then also let's see, Station 44, there's a kitchen counter replacement for $10,000. That's new. There's also an exterior repair that's needed at Station 44 for $14,000. Then at, let's see, 43, it's air compressor. Oh, one thing at the 3 stations with solar, there's money in there for this annual solar panel cleaning, which apparently is important. So there's money for that, as well as Station 43 has elevator service. So there's a lot of different maintenance needs at the different stations.
Sponge and a hose and clean them off. We have lots of hoses, lots of water, and trucks that shoot water. It shouldn't be, I mean, I do it to my house 3 times a year and it takes, an hour. So I don't know who we're hiring to do that, but, we should think about the capabilities we already have to do that ourselves. Great use of a ladder truck to show how we can get on a roof, that kind of thing. Training. I don't know.
Go up there and do it for them.
I'm happy to show them how to do it. Anyway, that was my list.
Hey, I have a few more. What's the ventilation fan for $7,000? Where's that going? That's on.
I'll find that. Hold on.
That's on the.
So that is
report.
in, let's see.
On the capital project.
Oh, it's at one of the stations. I don't know. I don't remember what station it is. So I don't know.
We also have, as part of the staff report, staff reviewed existing positions, job duties, and recommends increasing salary ranges in the following positions. Fuel mitigation specialist increased 10%, fuel mitigation manager 2.93%. So I don't see any data here where the data came from that that we need to do this. And 10% to me for fuel mitigation specialists seems like a lot. I mean, this is a kind of positions, as we all know, the kind of transitory, people here for a short amount of time. We just did a test for it. I think we had 10 applicants, which seems like we're getting enough applicants. To me, 10% seems like a lot without seeing the data from similar positions. And I don't know that a lot of places have these positions. But if we're looking at, kind of fine tuning the budget, I'd like to see a little bit more on where the data comes from to support giving, I'm okay with the 2.9% for fuel mitigation manager. Sounds reasonable to me, but if we're going to do it, I wouldn't mind seeing data for both of those positions.
Market data, there isn't necessarily market data, but I guess the other way you could look at it is if we think they're leaving because they have another opportunity that makes them more money, that's the same kind of job. If you think it's a retention question, that's a way to look at it. But I agree, that seems 10%, unless there's some reason we think that's required. That seems like a lot. Or maybe we haven't given them a raise for a couple of years. I don't know. But
Fire Marshal, do the 2 grant-funded fuel mitigation specialists do the same exact job as are the 3?
Yes, sir.
They do. There's no requirement for those 2 to do anything other for the grant. Nothing over or above what our regular.
Correct. They all inspect and do chipping.
Are we going to be able to spend the entire money? How long the grant lasts? Are we going to use it all up? This
2 grant-funded positions, sir. Yeah, I believe the plan is to fully expend those funds in those positions.
So under the the budget for the Board of Directors? What was the $75,000 professional services? What is that?
It's for the standards of cover report.
Oh. Well, okay. Okay, I'm going to ask more about that later. We also have, okay, well, I'll just leave that.
It was my understanding that we could save that by doing it in-house. Am I wrong about
I'm going
that?
to ask for a report for when we get to it.
Okay.
For next month. And a couple more. That one we already talked about. Oh, wait. That might have, on page 182, I think this is really a small thing, but we have, just for your information, we have firefighter paramedic Travis Dooley as a firefighter paramedic. He's now an engineer, so we can change that. If he's still going to continue on that program. Just small thing. And I have one other topic I wanted to talk about. So kind of behind the scenes, there's been discussion between the Moraga Garden Club and the UC Master Gardeners, which I'm part of, but I've just kind of joined this discussion. And the chief has been involved with some discussions with the Garden Club as well about doing some landscaping at Station 42. Right now, Station 42, I went by there today to take a look myself, and, Chief Lambert might agree with this, but the landscaping is bad. It needs to be much better of some way. And so there's been discussion with these various groups of doing kind of a firescaping project out there. Mostly volunteers, but there will be some funds required, probably for irrigation. And I think between the Garden Club and the Master Gardeners that I'm part of, we've already done these kind of projects. We did it at a fire station in Richmond and a library, and some other public projects. And so I think I can get a lot of volunteers out there, but there will be some funding required. And so I'm just bringing it up to the board. I think I'm also thinking maybe we can find some partners, maybe East Bay Mud, if we're going to do firescaping, they can have a sign out there, saying, it partnered with MOFD and the Garden Club, whatever, to do this project. But I'd like to see some funding in the budget. It'd probably be no more than $5,000, which would be for plants and irrigation, maybe some rock.
We actually have money in the budgets for each one of the firehouses to do maybe defensive maintenance.
We do, but the chief isn't here to really explain it, and I don't know if this is above what we have in here. I don't know. I'm sure. I feel pretty confident that we can find. It's not going to be a lot. I would think 5,000 probably at the most. But I think it would be a good project, and it'd be mostly volunteer labor. It'd be just for plants and irrigation, and maybe something for design. But this doesn't have to be a big project. So,
Good idea.
And
to show people what right looks like also.
There's an educational component to it.
Exactly. So, I
5-foot
would just.
setbacks and all those fun things. We ought to not just meet our code, we ought to meet, what may be the new code for that matter.
So somehow I'd like to see that come back. Maybe when the chief is back next month, we can talk about it further about how much, but I don't think I don't think it's going to be a lot. So I'd just like to see that in here. And I'd put a number. I don't know how we do it. Not to exceed $5,000, but somewhere along that. And maybe you talking to the chief and put a number in there. Or if I can talk to him or further, and maybe once I talk to some of the people I know in the garden club and with the master gardeners, maybe we can come up with some kind of budget. So. Okay,
Sounds good.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
question, the largest item obviously is salaries and compensation benefits, 28. Couple of items in there, just a question, because we only show it going up on terms of permanent salaries, 7%. I thought we were going to, one of the reasons that the overtime was going to go down is because we were going to be fully staffed. 7% is not fully staffed. I don't know how you,
So, okay, so the budget for fiscal year 2025 includes money for all authorized positions. So that is for full staffing. And then the overtime amount is at $1,816,000, which is a reduction because the budget assumes full staffing.
That's I know we've been doing this for years, and then there's roughly $1 million savings we have because we don't really plan to be at full staffing, and we never do. And as I understand it, people actually like that because they like the overtime. Some people like the overtime. So, alternative way to do this is to actually predict what we think is really going to happen instead of having a mid-year thing that shows that we have $1 million forecasted budget surplus because we didn't really have full staffing. So otherwise, we're kind of fooling ourselves to some extent. So why don't we just do it the way we really expect it to be?
At this point, we have 5 people in the fire academy that are going to graduate in May, and then we have one other person that's starting in May in a fire academy. So assuming all 6 of those people get through the academy successfully, then we only would have 2 vacant positions. So at this point, we're almost at full staffing. So would only be 2 vacant positions in fiscal year 2025.
Zero, so.
those additional positions, the 5 that you're talking about are in the academy. Their compensation certainly combined would be more than 800,000, wouldn't it? Or would it?
Well, not for salaries. No, that's just the salaries piece.
Like I said, salaries
starts
only
at
goes up
$100,000.
7% from this year, and yet we're going to be adding the 5 positions.
Right, yes, they're all the authorized positions are in the budget amount.
Again, I would argue that we ought to not do it that way. We ought to actually budget if we think we're not going to fill 2 positions, because it'd be starting today, it'd be pretty hard to fill those last 2 positions in the next year, or certainly not for the whole year. You'd have to go recruit them and get them all the way through school and all of that. So why don't we forecast what we really think is going to happen and save ourselves the $1 million surprise that isn't really a surprise in mid-year?
So my professional recommendation is that, so part of the budget process, when the board adopts the budget, it is legally appropriating the money so that staff can go spend the money based on the goals that have been adopted by the board. Okay, so part of the budget also is authorized positions, and the board authorizes the positions that are in the budget. So it's important for the budget, the dollar amounts to reflect those authorized positions. And that's important for a lot of reasons. And so my professional opinion and recommendation is that we fully budget based on authorized positions, and to leave it that, and to keep doing it that way.
I think we're maybe confusing some thoughts. We're authorizing positions. We have several more positions that are authorized that we haven't filled for years and years and years, like 4 or 5 more. And so, yeah, forget about the safety people. We have other positions we haven't filled. So we can still authorize the position. So that doesn't really have anything to do with the money. That just has to do with how many positions we have. We are authorizing an organizational chart. Great. But when it comes to actually forecasting how much money you're going to spend, why should we fool ourselves and put in a number that we know isn't correct? That seems worse to me than, being arbitrary the other way, why not put in a number that actually reflects what we expect reality to be? It isn't like we're not going to authorize having all the money. We have a revenue line. We're authorizing a revenue line anyway. And we're authorizing expenses, and all the other expenses that we don't spend go into a fund. So it's not really, there isn't any problem with doing that. It isn't like we're giving up money or something. But what we're doing is we're not having an accurate forecast that we know up front isn't accurate, sort of by definition isn't accurate.
Back to 2024, because we had budgeted, which would have been authorized positions, 11,530. We actually spent 11,344, almost all of it. I mean, it was pretty close.
So looking at last year, that's the amended budget fiscal year 2024. So there was a budget adjustments have been done. So that amended budget from 2024 is not what was in the original adopted budget.
That was not in the original. Okay.
Right.
Happens every year, and it's happened every year for the last 6 years, that we again have a roughly $1 million surprise every year that isn't a surprise because we aren't actually spending the money on our full staff. We're saving money because we're not paying the benefits on overtime. Fine. But why don't we forecast what we really think is going to happen? And if we aren't going to have 2 positions filled, we should forecast that and forecast the appropriate amount of overtime. What's wrong with doing it right? I mean, normally budgets are you try to get as close to reality as you can get.
There will just be, so I want to draw the board's attention to in the budget, in the board packet, pages 152 and 153. So these are the authorized positions that when you adopt the budget, the board is authorizing staff to fill these positions. So you can see in all the positions in finance and administration are filled with people. HR, they're full. All the positions are full except in emergency operations. There's 2 vacant firefighter paramedic positions. And that's it. Fire prevention is fully staffed. Emergency preparedness is fully staffed. Well, except for the office specialists. We haven't filled that yet. And the tunnel East Bay Hills. So all of the authorized positions are full except for the 2 new positions of deputy fire chief and office specialist and for 2 firefighter paramedics.
Well, I have a question about your statement. When you say we're authorizing the people to hire this, I don't think that's true. I think it takes a special board action to change the number of people that we're hiring. So, just because you allocate funds to things, and because otherwise you could argue that the chief for the last 6 years has not done his duty and not done what the board told him to do, which is to spend the money to hire those people. I don't think that's what we want to say. So in reality, I think what we're saying is we're allocating funds so that if we decide we want to, we can do that, but we're not actually authorizing him to do it in this budget. It takes a separate board action to change staffing. So now you can go ahead and keep going, but I don't think what you said was correct.
Question I had on that schedule is on the workers' comp, which is $1,500,000 versus $1,286,000. Recovery was $450,000 and the recovery on a higher number is only $100,000. What's the rationale?
I was just being conservative to show the recovery at $100,000. It will likely be more, but if that's based on injuries, so I just was conservative with $100,000 of recovery.
You mentioned the ration, the difference in the 2 years. Is that a fixed number? I mean, are we self-insured?
No, we are part of a joint powers agreement with other local government agencies. And so our rates are based on what's an X mod factor. So it's basically based on the last 5 years of costs. And so then the rate gets changed. So our rate is based on our history.
Very almost self-insured. You mentioned that we are a higher claim rate. What are we talking about? What kind of claim related activity is increasing it.
There's been a lot of people off on workers' comp in this fiscal year. There's a variety of injuries.
Work-related injuries.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think we're self-insured. I think this joint thing that we have is actually just a pool. So we all buy insurance at a group rate, but so is it based on our particular history or is it based on the group's history?
It's based on our history.
But we buy as a group is the point, even though so it's just buying power, I guess, except that our rate is based on our history, not the group's history.
Correct.
Okay. But but we do buy the insurance. We're not self-insured. We just buy insurance as a group.
No, it's not really insurance. It's a pool. So we all put money into this pool, which is a separate local government agency, this pool. And so the money that all the agencies go in there pays for the claims and the costs.
In reality, it ends up, if our rated based on our claims, over a period of time, our expenditures go up.
Correct.
Our experience on recoveries is higher than we're budgeting.
Right. In the current fiscal year, 2024, we're going to recover about $450,000. It comes from the Joint Powers Agency. They send a check. So if someone's off work completely on workers' comp, then we get money each week to cover the cost of that.
They're giving us back the money we put in is the point.
Correct.
So shouldn't it be a zero-sum game at the end of the day then? Since our history, our costs are based on our history. So aren't we just putting it into a joint pool then? And sure that you get some buffer, but why isn't it all ours at the end of the day? Why isn't there a separate account?
I'd have to go look at the agreement, but the agreement, that's part of the pooling, right? Is that you share risk and so forth by everyone coming together. And theoretically you get lower costs because you have more buying power in terms of negotiating expenses and so forth, and you share administration. So that's the whole pooling and risk piece of it.
I'd like to understand that more because it's a big number and I'd want to make sure we're getting the right answer for that so that we can put that on the agenda for how we, send out a copy of the contract and see how our history's been. Because theoretically, if we're getting some benefit, if we put in $1 million, we ought to be getting back out $1 million if that's what our experience and our costs are.
Well,
we don't want to be subsidizing somebody else that has a worse history, I guess is my point.
Yeah, but it's insurance. I mean,
it's not insurance. It's a pool. It isn't insurance. There's no third party that's insuring it. And if we're sharing risk, that means we are potentially, somebody else might be subsidizing us or we might be subsidizing them. That's the question. And if all we're doing is, smoothing out the highs and lows of our particular risk profile, that's cool. But at the end of the day, you ought to be putting in the amount of money that reflects your risk and therefore you ought to be getting paid back that other than other overhead kind of expenses.
Just remember there are a number of components to workers' comp. So one, which is actually comparatively small, is salary replacement. So that's the 450 you're looking at, well, or the 100, depending on how you look at it, the salary replacement. The other components are the medical. There's a whole medical thing. And then there's a tremendous amount of administration that has to go into this because there are all these legal proceedings, right, that go on, and a lot of these are uncontested. But then you have also SMEs, and you have exams, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes into this. So there are a lot of costs here. And what I'm hearing from Gloria Ann is the recovery just relates to a specific component, which is the salary component of it.
But it's still fine. But it still begs a question about whether we're getting the right deal from this group that we're part of. Because if it turns out that we're in with a group that has, 5 times the injury rate that we do, and we're having to pay our premium that's based on their issues also, and all the claims they have and all the legal fees they have and whatever, if they have a lot more than we happen to have, then it sounds to me like we're subsidizing them.
Well, I
potentially.
think it would, because this is a complicated area and an interesting area and one that is driving your costs. So I think it's worth having a presentation to the board at some point, maybe sooner rather than later, I don't know, on comp and how it works and what we're paying and how our rate's established and all of that.
But we get out of the pool, because again, you
in
know,
the pool,
pools
right.
are, it's like when you're a young employer and an old employee and you go in and you have to pay the same medical insurance premium as the people who have, you know, 5 times the medical bills you do. You want to be sure you're on the old end of that, not the young end of that, you know. And if it's the same thing here, if it turns out we have a younger group than everybody else has, or we have fewer claims because, you know, for whatever reason, we want to make sure we've negotiated the right deal with this.
One of the great advantages of the kind of arrangement we have with these public JPAs that run these is they are transparent. So we will be able to get that information from them.
But I think we should just have a separate presentation on that then. But we still didn't figure out whether how we're going to do our budget relative to, well, and did you say that salaries at the moment are assumed to be a 0 increase? It's a no increase.
Right. So the salary costing information is based on the current salary schedule. So no increase because we're in ongoing labor negotiations.
All right. In the interest of time, I think I need to sort of figure out whether we need to take a break around 9 o'clock and reconvene, or whether
I think we're almost done, but
right.
it's not obvious that 0 is the right answer. I mean, we pretty much know it's not going to be 0.
Well, I think we've agreed that we're going to defer these issues to a subsequent board meeting where we can get the information and the data that we need. So what I'm suggesting is maybe, can we move on to whatever other issues that we have? What's that?
I mean, my
I need you to speak in the
comments.
microphone.
Ready to hear from the public? Yeah. I'm ready to hear from the public on it. And
Can I ask one question? So there's no salary increase in here. So I need some clarification because in the past, what we've done then when the new MOUs come to the board for adoption and for approval, then at that point, the board has done a budget adjustment so that the cost of the MOU is transparent and so that the public can see how much the MOU is costing. And so we can do it that way, or we could put in a salary increase to the budget if that's what the board prefers.
Up in the gun at this point. I think we ought to gather up the information before we adjust based upon a salary that
Who knows what it is?
we don't know what it is.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anybody else, anything else that we should discuss now, or should we take public comment? All right, let's take public comment.
We have one hand raised.
Good evening. This is the sound of one hand raised. First of all, can somebody please explain to me what a workshop is? I don't understand this.
Well, you've got your 3 minutes, Jonathan. It's an information, it's a discussion of the issues in order to inform the board, the staff, and the public.
Yeah, I thought before the 3-minute rule was not in, it was suspended, or there was more opportunity for back and forth discussion. Am I wrong about that?
You've got 3 minutes to make comments, questions, whatever you want to say about this. It's not if we made it an open dialogue, we could be here until midnight. And I think it's in the interest of
It's been that way in the past, and we weren't here till midnight. And, geez, it's one person here. Well, how about we restart the clock?
How about you make your comments, and if we decide.
A whole minute's, okay, all right. But you used up half of that.
Jonathan, you asked a question, and then there was silence. I was prepared to let you speak for 3 minutes.
I didn't think there was a 3-minute rule on this. That's what happened there. Okay, but first of all, I want to know.
We've operated. Comment has been 3 minutes since I've joined.
You're taking up more of my time, right?
Well, look.
Or can you extend my time? I mean, can't we be happy about this? felicitous?
You know, as a matter of fairness, I'd be happy to extend your time, but the Brown Act requires the president to open it for public comment, and we've set a 3-minute rule. If you ask a question, then, it's up to the discretion of the president to say, well, maybe I'll extend it 10 seconds for the period of time that I answer the question. Maybe we're ready to take a break. I'm ready to take a break. But if there's something that other than asking for the definition of a workshop.
Of course I have. I want to, I'm down to 47 seconds now.
Well,
Come on, let's be reasonable.
And Jonathan, I can't anticipate what all your questions are. I tried to answer the question
I
about.
want to ask.
What?
All right, let's just get going, can we?
Let him have a few minutes. I mean, a couple more minutes.
Give him his 3 minutes and.
Yeah, if you want to start over and have your 3 minutes, don't ask a question, just make 3 minutes of comments and I'll be happy to extend it.
It's perfectly fair to ask procedural clarification, in my opinion. And now my time is pretty much up, so we can just restart in 7 seconds. Why don't you talk for another 6 seconds?
Well, I said that I'd extend your time to 3 minutes. Do you have 3 minutes of comments to make?
Let's go, okay?
Well, I'm restarting the 3 minutes. Do you want to start over?
First comment is full staffing at Station 45 has not been mentioned here. I'm wondering if the board has determined policy about this or if it's just been overlooked. Second comment, about this deputy fire chief business. Don't you want more than just a job description? Don't you want to understand the context of this? Don't you want an analysis of what this position would actually accomplish? What is missing now? What's not happening? What are the defects in the operation? Don't you want to know that and compare that to, in an analysis, with something else that was mentioned in the report someplace about hiring a 4th battalion chief? These were talked about as either or things, but there's no, you're directed to discuss this stuff, but you have no basis for discussing this because you were given no analysis, is my point. There's also no alternatives analysis. Why do you have to spend every dollar you take in? Why can't some more of this money be put aside for what happens every few, like Jerry Brown did for the state, and use money, put money aside for when the economy goes bad, which it does on a periodic basis. Also, for facilities, those things always cost more than you think. I mean, that's just the way that is. Back to the, sorry, jump around haphazardly here, but back to the deputy fire chief comment. There was also not just a 4th BC, but an assistant fire marshal. So what's that about? Why is this not? Well, I can see why it's not in the report. The chief's not here to write it. But how can you possibly have an intelligent discussion about the assistant fire marshal position when there's no analysis explaining how the whole thing works, laying it out, opening it up? What happens is you guys get a little bit, usually more than this, a little bit of information. You ask a few questions around the edges, and then you make uninformed decisions because you don't see the larger picture. Now, that's my opinion. Maybe you feel differently about that. That's what I see, because all of your information comes from a single source that's, doesn't always, I don't know, it's maybe sometimes choosy about what you get told. I'd like to see personally an analysis of the efficacy of CERT. Does it really do anything? I mean, is it worth anything? I mean, really, other than, window dressing? I find that an interesting question. Lastly, you have a retired annuitant working half-time, making 200 grand, some of which comes back to the district, makes you money. It's reminiscent of the Pete Nowicki situation where, with agreement with the board, he ended up drastically increasing his return. He wasn't working for it. It was just his
Thank you,
retirement.
Jonathan.
Similarities, there are also differences. I just thought you would benefit by that being pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
We do not have any more hands raised or any other public comment.
I'll just give one brief comment.
Go ahead.
You might have noticed we're actually not spending all of the money because that's what they call the general fund balance, and it's growing in one of the forecasts to $60 million in the next 10 years. So we are not spending all of the money, we're building the reserves.
I don't know that we need or that procedurally a motion is required. We've given direction and I think we can move on. So I know it's 9:04. Does anybody need a break or do we think that we're close enough to concluding the meeting that we should go ahead with 9.4?
I'm happy to keep going, but if somebody wants a break, that's great.
I'm good with going forward. Unless
Okay. Agenda item 9.4, increase expenditures for fire prevention in the home hardening grant program to include advertising. Provide direction regarding the continuation of the home hardening grant program in fiscal year 2024-25. Let's discuss.
Good evening, directors. At the March 2024 meeting, regular board meeting, a director asked for a future agenda item to discuss increasing expenditures for fire prevention, including advertising of the home hardening grant program. As part of the fiscal year 2024 budget process, the MOFD Board of Directors approved implementing a $500,000 home hardening grant program. This program is open to all residents within MOFD's jurisdiction for the 23-24 fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. The home hardening grant reimburses for ember-resistant vents not exceeding $1,000 per parcel, excuse me, or in-kind materials the district provides. The approved reimbursement guidelines are limited to the purchase of materials, installation or other labor costs are excluded. Eligible projects are limited to the retrofit of existing residential vents not otherwise required by code, using materials and construction methods approved by the ember-resistant construction in accordance with standards identified in Section 7A of the California Building Code and R337 of the California Residential Code. A comprehensive list of vents is available to the public at the Office of the State Fire Marshal's website for wildland urban interface building materials. For those residents who prefer the in-kind materials, MOFD distributes upon request bush fire mesh, which is now wildfire defense mesh, 1/16 of an inch and 7.5 inch widths for the residents to install. The home hardening grant program also provides metal gutter guards to residents at no cost, which the board approved April 19th, 2023. At the November 15th, 2023 regular board meeting, the board approved the following. 1, continue the practice to hire external crews to cut and or burn brush in the district, areas to be determined by the fire chief or designee. 2, place advertisements for availability of screen and gutter guards to increase adoption. 3, extend existing program of paying for outside chipper crews, similar to what has been done in the past during the summer months when our crews are inspecting. Staff requests the following. 1, direction to increase expenditures for fire prevention. 2, approval to amend and expand the home hardening grant program to include advertising. 3, direction regarding continuation of the home hardening grant program in fiscal year 24-25.
Questions?
No, I'll make some.
Go ahead, Director Jorgens.
The staff question number 2 was answered by the line, 2 lines above it, which says that we are able to place advertisements to show it. So we know the answer to that one. It already got approved.
Can we, before we move on, can we talk about that one a minute? The advertising? So we, I see advertising on our website. The city of Orinda at least puts it on their, in their newsletters that they do. But I think we could do a better job. As probably, I know Craig has talked about it before. There's a lot of residents who don't even know about this program. I know,
Residents don't
you're
know
right.
about it.
And I'm not really sure how we do that. Maybe if we haven't, one thing I was thinking about is like the postcard we send out, the letter. Maybe we can put something in all those letters if we haven't finalized that letter yet. We did last year, we did actually letters. It was an envelope, that kind of, I was thinking we could do an insert in that. Everyone's going to get it. So if they read it or not, that's another story, but at least we know we're going to hit every property owner. So I just think we need to do a better job of advertising this program.
And I think, for example, another way to do it, it's really inexpensive, is we have for announcing, June 1st as the day for fire fuel abatement done. Other times of year when we aren't using those signs, we can put a different message on it that says, call this number, go to this website, go to this QR code, pick your flavor, however, whatever is current these days, to get your free gutter guards and free screens. And if you even left it at gutter guards, that would probably, but just I don't think it's that, and put those at the end of some, minor road and a couple of big streets that, there are feeder roads for these things, Orinda and Moraga residents get free, whatever.
I'm sorry, maybe the BART station.
That's what I suggested several months ago. Yeah, exactly. So I don't think the advertising, mailing stuff is expensive. It takes a lot of time and a lot of people don't read that stuff. But I think just putting a sign up someplace, and especially the little sandwich boards, it's amazing how many, you have to drive right by it. And it's, it's why is that here? It's new, it's different. And free is a pretty powerful concept. People like free things. So I don't know. I think that's something we could fairly easily work on. But actually, I think that it might have been a bit of a misnomer. I was happy with the amount of money we're spending. What I was really trying to do is, so far this year, we haven't spent all the money we've already allocated, and that's what I really wanted to work on. And that's why the chief sent me off since the last board meeting to go find homeowners associations and things that, instead of having our staff have to do a lot of, nights, weekends, weird times, training outsiders, all these things that didn't work that well, to hand them out one at a time to people that showed up in a line in their cars to do drop shipping into big groups. Fine. But the idea was to actually, saying we're in the fire prevention business is terrific, but if you don't actually do it, it doesn't count, because the house is still burned down and the stuff's still all out there. Have we tried to go hire more crews to do, we're doing great on the fuel break. But if we, the chief had talked about, one of the most important things we could do is there are certain areas that are the most at risk for the fires coming from Briones and those sort of things. Let's go have the crews, cut down the brush and in the areas that are the most risky. They said that there was a Contra Costa County crew that could use in the springs to do these kinds of things. Let's do it. Those are the kinds of things that I'd like to see happen. And I hope they're not overly hard to do, but we having excess money, having money left in the budget means we didn't get enough work done, is the way I would look at that. And personally, I think early on, a couple of years ago, we had the whole, apply for $1,000 and all that stuff. Personally, I think that's probably not where we ought to go. I think I would be in favor of not doing that anymore. First off, nobody does it. But I think it'd be a lot better to emphasize the give it away when you show up or in groups, or have the Firewise organizations, manage the 10 houses or 20 houses they're in, to get their gutter guards and those sort of things, or to arrange for, maybe there are big HOAs that can arrange to have some of the brush cut by our crew or whatever, and then burned, of course, because that's the biggest thing. Is, if I don't think most people, you guys have to burn stuff. We can't burn stuff. So, but if that's an important thing to do, is to eliminate the brush that's out there and get it burned, because a lot of it's so far out that it would be relatively impossible to make it just go away. And so the burning, I think, is a perfect way to do it, but we need to see if we can do more of that, if we can. But, and again, I'm happy to get rid of the actual grant program that we called a grant program. I think that's a lot of paperwork and a lot of hassle, and it isn't very well done anyway, so utilized anyway. So I would be happy to make it simpler and just do more, a little bit more advertising to give away the things we are giving away, and more, hiring crews to do brush removal.
I agree. I think that'd be good.
Just although I'm a lawyer, this is a non-lawyer suggestion, but it's something that many jurisdictions that I work in have used. I know this sounds possibly expensive, but
One of the challenges I think for a district like this is so leanly staffed is, the public communications aspect of things is, it's hard. It takes a lot of attention, et cetera. And Orinda, for example, just hired the very same people our law firm uses to help push out messages and things like that. They're not terribly expensive because they're mostly social media kinds of messages and things like that, and emails and things like that. So I'm not suggesting great ways to spend money, but I think what real challenge for staff is, you're not staffed heavily enough to drive a consistent public relations program that gets information out there. Or not public relations is the wrong word, public information program. So just something to think about for the future, that these folks are not that expensive, and they can be very good at, we found in our own law firm that just having a person saying, what's your news this month? How do you want to put it out? Just keeping that process going is very helpful.
Okay, thank you. But I guess I have yet to talk to a single person that knew we were giving away gutter guards. And I've talked to hundreds of people about it. And so somehow the money they're spending, the money the websites we're doing, the mailings we're doing, all of that, people, again, why don't we have we send people around to inspect all over the place, right? Have them take along a sandwich board, put it at the road where they're doing the inspections, and say, so people drive, they can move them around, they're inspecting different things all over the place. The thing that's going to cost money and might be hard, which we need to think about, is now when people react to that, who are they going to call? What are they going to do? It's that back end system we need to figure out a little bit. But somehow there has to be a way to, maybe I would find it better to spend a little bit of money on it, have somebody spend one of our specialists spend an hour a day listening to the voicemails and making a list or something, to be able to, there ought to be some way to implement some of that doesn't take a huge amount of time and isn't too expensive. Again, it could be a QR code. It can be a phone call. You leave a voicemail with your name and address and phone number. Somehow there's got to be a way to then put all that into something that we can use to get the word out. But again, I think that's going to be an ever decreasing part of our budget. What I'm the most focused on is the cutting down the brush and actually making stuff go away that burns. And we're the ones that you're the ones, not us. You guys are the ones that know. The chief has all these wonderful models that show, which valley the wind is going to blow, and it's going to come down, and it's going to start right here, and because it happened to be right at the end of Dalewood. This is the last one I heard. It's across the street across Bear Creek Road from Briones, but I'm sure there are a lot of those, priority areas around that we as a community ought to go. And a lot of it's open space. I don't care who owns it. But that's the kind of places we ought to be thinking about building a deep fire break, or whatever you want to call it, and getting rid of a lot of the brush. We're doing a lot of those things, but building a little ring all the way around helps, I'm sure, but I think even more focused would probably be better. My 2 bits worth.
Any other comments? Should we move to public comment? Let's do so.
We do not have any hands raised or public comment.
Then we can move on to agenda item 9.5. Adopt resolution 24.04, approving a capital assets policy and increasing the capitalization threshold from 5,000 to 40,000.
The district's fixed assets policy was last updated 15 years ago. At the recent audit committee meeting, the committee asked if there were any accounting policies that need to be updated. The fixed assets policy was identified. The current policy requires purchases of $5,000 or higher to be capitalized and depreciated. $5,000 is a low amount and does not reflect a current materiality threshold for the district. Staff and the audit committee recommend increasing the capitalization threshold from $5,000 to $40,000. There's a red line legislative version it's included as attachment B for the recommended policy changes, as well as a final version as attachment C. At this time, I'll ask the audit committee members if they have any comments regarding the recommended changes.
Greg, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I can make a comment on that. This came up at the audit committee meeting. We discussed it among the audit committee, but we also talked to the.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Oh, am I not coming through?
No, Director,
You're echoing, reverberating. Can we
Oh,
clear up that?
Director Hassler, can you check your sound? And it might be coming from,
Turn down the volume.
Is this better?
yes, that's better.
Okay. At the audit committee meeting, we discussed the policy. We also discussed the policy with the auditor to see what other jurisdictions did. And we discussed many different levels, and we came up with $40,000 was more reasonable than the 5,000. One, it covers larger items, and two, it just keeps the record keeping to a minimum. John, I don't know what else you wanted to say on this one, but
I think you covered it well. I think we made a recommendation, and that's why it's on the agenda to change the policy from 5 to 40,000.
Sounds good to me. Any other comments from the board? Can we take public comment? Do we need to take public comment? Yes, we do. So
We do not have any hands raised or public comment.
Then I move we adopt resolution 24-04 approving the capital asset.
I second that.
Let's have a vote.
Director Danziger?
Aye.
Director Hassler?
aye.
Director Jex?
Aye.
Director Jorgens?
Aye.
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 Agenda item 10, committee reports. 10.1, Standing Audit Committee, Directors Hassler and Jex. Greg, do you?
Yeah, we had an audit committee meeting on the 1st of April. We discussed the audit, the past audit. We discussed the upcoming audit, the status, the interim testing that would be done, and proceeding. Everything seemed to be in order, and the audit's going to proceed as planned with an on-time delivery, and everything seemed to be in order. We did have a list of things we walked through with the auditors. I didn't, at least in my notes, note anything that appeared out of the ordinary from that meeting that would be worthy of reporting. But John, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
The format of the meeting is we had a list of questions that we had of management, and then we went through those, and then we had about 20 questions that we had for the auditors, and they responded appropriately, and so we're satisfied that we're on the right track.
We need to ensure we keep a list of those kinds of questions so we know in case we end up with people who are professional accountants in the future. We know what questions to ask.
God
The question should be in the meeting minutes. Yeah, the question should be in the meeting minutes that we went through. So
The questions are part of the packet.
Great, thank you both.
There wasn't, we're going to the next one.
Yeah, unless somebody else, anything else on 10.1, let's move to 10.2, the ad hoc committee, joint fire prevention with the city of Orinda, directors Jorgens and Romer. Go ahead.
So we did have a meeting with, we call it the 2x2 meeting. We did have that meeting, it's been almost a month ago now, actually, because it was shortly after the last board meeting. And we have found it to be a very good sort of touch base educational process with the city of Orinda and the city manager and a couple of the board members from the city of Orinda. They have, I think they're almost, it's a status report. It's going over because people rarely come to our board meetings. So it's, how are things coming on the grant programs? Do we have any more ideas about how to advertise things? We talk a little bit about, programs that the city of Orinda is doing. How is our chipper program going? There, it's really just a status, but at the same time, there's a lot of, each time you talk about status, there are always questions about things and, how are we doing? People understand more about why we're doing our inspections in certain ways, because again, they aren't coming to the board meeting. So this is really a chance for us to tell them, for example, gee, last year we started in the north part of Orinda for a reason because you end up with a huge fire buffer, things like that help educate the board members, the staff members that are there from the city. And I think it's, as a concept, we should try to maybe get it going with the city of Moraga if they would like to, because I think it has been a good educational tool for people who make similar kinds of, have the city of Moraga, the city of Orinda has its own budget, a big budget actually, to do prevention kinds of things. And I don't know that the city of Moraga has that, but I think it's something that we should encourage them to at least get their council educated on the things that we think matter and how we interact with each other. And there's a lot of just coordination, how do we coordinate on emergency responses? Because the emergency response thing is, the police department, which reports to the city council. And that it's true in Moraga. So that everybody really understands how things all work together. We have we already do have joint exercises with people, but I think it's been a very helpful format that we all, understand why various legal entities do the things they're doing and get motivated, and it's helpful.
I don't have anything to add. Agenda item 11.
We need to open public comment on the committee report. We do not have any public comment.
Agenda item 11, requests for items on future agendas. I think we've already got a couple of those that were brought up, but do we need to reiterate those, or do we want to add to them, Director Danziger?
I don't need to reiterate. I'd like to add. I'd like to see an agenda item having to do with the, I don't know if this came through in the budget discussion on the standards of coverage. Now, I'm okay if the chief wants to just report out when the chief gives reports, or if he wants to make an agenda item. Either way, I'm okay, but I'd like to hear about the $75,000 that's in the budget and, what we can expect, kind of a status report on that. Okay. And then I have one other one. Some months ago, and even going back over a year ago, there's an East Bay Hills Wildfire Prevention Group that's proposing an MOU, and I believe we put in like $3,000 to this group to help them get started. This probably about a year ago, and we've recently gotten an email. I think all the directors and the chief received this, asking for our participation and listing all these other groups that have already kind of signed up. And just reviewing the list, it looks like we're the only ones that have not signed up in the area. So I'd like to see an agenda item kind of where we can discuss that. There's some information that came from, who did it come from? Yeah, Mr. Kaufman, who seems to be running the meetings at least. He sent us an email. I'd like to see that in there, and we can just discuss where it's at and have the chief talk to us. I know he talked to us about a year ago, but I'd like to hear further about that.
Summary of what they would expect of us if we do join. This is the money, is their staff time, whatever.
I think the issue is we did pony up $3,500 some 6 months to a year ago, and I think there's an expectation that it's not just participation, but it's a financial contribution as well. So there should be a cost benefit analysis of that as well. But that will be added. So the request to add that to the May agenda. Anything else?
On a roll.
See if there's any public comment.
Public comment?
We have no public comment.
Unless there's something.
I move we adjourn.
Second it.
I'm sorry, I missed who motioned.
A motion
Jex.
to adjourn.
Jex did.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. Director Danziger?
Aye.
Director Hassler?
Aye.
Director Jex?
Aye.
Director Jorgens?
Aye.
President Romer?
Aye.
The time is 9:28.
Job.
Nice.